Okay, I'm just smashing out a few of these recordings today. I've realized that I feel like I'm always entertaining maybe like 6 ideas at once. And then I kind of think like, oh, I don't have enough information, or I haven't thought about that enough for me to like it to be worthy of a podcast episode. But then I'm realizing that like a week later, I'm thinking about something else. So like I'm just going to record these and or I might just record them in batches and be like, this is everything I'm contemplating at the time. And then, by next week I'll be doing something else, and that's good because then I'll like continuously have content, I suppose. But it was making me think about how it's hard to put out your art because there's this feeling inside you that like it has to be a certain level of excellence before you're ready to put it out into the world. And it's like something about sharing your art is so scary because to share your art is to share your soul in your most vulnerable form, I think, because it's such a raw, I feel like your art is a conversation with yourself. Like the process is a reflection of you back to you, and sharing that with the world is scary, but also why it's so rewarding because people see that in themselves as well, which I guess is what I like about art. And so, the overriding theme going through my head, which is fighting my perfectionism, is just put it out. Like it's okay to just put it out. Doesn't matter how it's received. And so something that I wanted to talk about today is judgment, or how to not care what people think. And, I have a lot of quotes about pretty much every topic, but I've never seen any real good advice about how to not care what people think. People's response is usually just, who gives a fuck what they think? And like, I agree with that, but how? So, I'm going to share what I tell myself, the advice that I give myself. And it's this: you're always going to care what people think of you. Do it anyway. And I think I've held myself back in the past because I feel like caring what people think of me is a mental block that I have to overcome before I can start ABC. And it's like, no, I think I have to just get used to the fact that I'm going to care and learn to build up the bravery and courage to do it anyway. And I think there's a fine line with that too, because in the past, I think some people are surprised sometimes when I say that I do care what people think of me. And I think it's normal to care what people think of you. I mean, being accepted socially is so important, especially from a sociological point of view. Like it's important to be accepted into the tribe, or else like, in the old days, that's like what we needed to survive. And so of course, like being accepted is important on some level. You kind of have to be a psychopath to not care what people think of you. But I think like actually one of the gifts of autism and being like feeling used to like not belonging and fitting in, being rejected, is that I'm okay with that by this age. Like I've let go of so many people in my life that it's like, I'm okay if people don't like me anymore. Like it hurts, but like I'm okay with that pain. I felt it before, I'll feel it again. And so that's freeing in a way. And so it wasn't accidental that I started this podcast talking about art, because I believe that like art is one of the hardest things that you can share publicly with people, and to not care what people think. And probably the hardest thing that maybe one of the hardest things I've ever done, but one of the hardest things I've ever shared is like when I first started writing about like my journey. Rat calls me the Little Journey because I always say the word journey, like that's my rap name. When I like started on my journey and I started writing about the journey, first of all, I was so happy that I had something to actually write about as a writer. But secondly, I was so terrified of sharing that blog publicly. Just so beyond terrifying, because it was just so vulnerable in a way, I suppose. And I remember like when I first released that blog, the first one I wrote, which is Self-Love is the New Drug, which is mostly about self-love and forgiveness. I posted it and I just like could not, for like 3 days, I just could not look at my phone. Like every time I opened Instagram, I was so scared, because I was just so scared of just receiving hate or judgment about it. And I was going through a phase at the time of just like any fear I had, I was pushing back against it, because I realized how much fear had led me through life and how powerless I felt to my fears. And so I went through a phase of just like, fuck this, I'm just going to, any fear, like fuck it, I'm going to overcome it. And I think there is some wisdom to that, but I also believe that it's not necessarily the best thing to do. Sometimes you have to be respectful of the part of you that is afraid. And sometimes that part of you has good reason to be afraid. It's trying to protect you. And so I've learned to find that fine line now of just like being comfortable of when I'm ready to post something and share something. I have to be, ready for the criticism in a way if it were to come. But the response was actually the opposite. I actually found a lot of people gave me really positive feedback and said that they really resonated with what I said. And then I started finding the other people who were like me, and it made me wonder how I always feel like I'm alone, but how am I meant to find the other people who are like me if I don't reveal who I am? And so I think like anytime I care what somebody thinks of me, there's kind of a process behind that. Like I have to analyze that and be like, okay, like why do I care if people think this particular thing about me? And then usually there's something to process, like, okay, well, I've been called that maybe when I was 10 years old, and, maybe there's some trauma around that I have to sort out. Or maybe there's a part of me that agrees with them. Maybe they're actually pointing out like a character flaw in me that actually needs some work or some healing. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's interesting because I actually think about, okay, who's saying this? And I'll picture like the one individual person, and I'll be like, I haven't even spoken to you since like high school. And like, I barely even knew you then. Why the fuck are you still living inside my psyche? Like, why do I care what you think? And so that's interesting because then when you see it like that, it's like, oh, okay. And I think the thing is that like when people have judged you over the course of your life, their voices kind of enter into your life, into your mind, and then you learn to judge yourself. And I think it's something to just recognizing that if you can defeat that demon, that one thought of fear inside your own head, then anyone else who has the same thought, they completely lose their power. It doesn't matter. And sometimes I think for me, it's like maybe before I post something, I need to process like what my response would be if someone were to judge me or hate me for a certain thing. So I feel more prepared, and then I feel comfortable. And so I think that's another thing that's important for me as well. So the truth is for me is that I do care what people think of me. I just do it anyway. You know what I mean? Like when I'm like, there's like funny when people online talk about like being an introvert who dresses like an extrovert. Like that's me. Like a lot of the time I wear something that's fucking crazy. And like there's been times, not really anymore, but when I was younger, where I'm like shaking like a leaf inside because I'm wearing something crazy, but I do it for me because I've got my own back and because it's important to me. And I think that's what I love about fashion, actually. I think fashion is about failing publicly, and you got to go through that to be able to like actually find your style and do it well. And actually some other good advice that I heard is from Alex Hormozi, who has a podcast. And he says that in 100 years from now, everyone that you know will be dead, including you. And like you'll be forgotten. And in 200 years, you'll be completely forgotten. So why does you're living your life through the fears of what people think of you? All those people are going to be dead anyway. It's not going to matter in 200 years. So why are you letting it stop you from chasing your dreams in life? You know what I mean? And that's the other thing, like I realized as well, like I used to really care what people thought of me with like new clothing and like my art and things like that. And now I realize there's two types of people in the world. There's the people who judge because they're so afraid of even trying that they will judge you for trying because you're doing something that they can't. So they're trying to tear you down. And then there's the other people who go, fuck yeah, that's awesome. Good on you. Well done. And so, yeah, you're going to let go of the people who are going to judge you and don't like you, but you're going to find the other people who respect what you're doing, who respect that you're willing to fail publicly, who are also chasing their dreams. And if I had to choose between who I want to be surrounded by, I know exactly which one it is other than the other. So something that I wanted to do now is I wanted to read something from one of my blog posts, which is Love Over Fear. And this is on planetmu.com.au. And I actually go into judgment a little bit. And so I wanted to read a couple of paragraphs because I feel like I just articulated it best there. So like, it's no point in me like trying to do it again. So yeah, if you wanted to read the whole thing, it's up there on the website. So who you are is not defined by other people, and their judgment of you is just a projection of their own fears. We judge people who are different to us because they make us question if we should be like them. We judge people who embody the aspects of ourselves we have rejected because we can't stand to see our own shadow. We judge to create a hierarchy and place ourselves as superior because really we feel inferior. I've learned to pity those who judge you, for it correlates with how they judge themselves. Eventually I stopped caring what other people think of me. I stopped censoring my personality to ensure people wouldn't think I was fat, loud, attention seeking, self-absorbed, talking shit, or handed a good life that no one knew anything about. But I did still care if people thought I was a good person or not. I hated the feeling of misrepresenting myself and would always end up trying to prove I was a good person. The truth is that no matter what you do, some people are going to think you are shit. And sometimes you have to be. Sometimes you have to fuck up and make moral mistakes and contradict yourself in order to grow. Sometimes you have to be a cunt to draw a boundary. Other times, you just don't know what the right thing to do is until you make the mistake. People either have faith in you as a person or they don't. And if they don't, you don't need them in your life. Letting go of them leaves space for new people to come in. And at the end of the day, it's only your approval that matters. When you care what other people think of you, you put yourself at their feet for their approval. That's what they want. That's why they judge, to feel powerful. I realised it was some of the people closest to me whom I felt most judged by. I realised I surrounded myself with people like this because I was unconsciously seeking redemption through them. It was like I needed them to approve of me because if they could approve of me, then I could approve of me. Eventually I learned to approve of myself, and once I did, these relationships simply fell away. And then I have a quote by the Dalai Lama. Love is the absence of judgment.